You're talking almost about two different problems. So one of the biggest challenges that we have seen and where we really work in Climate is around how do you finance this TRL4 to TRL10 stage that Beetle mentioned about. The first stage, and honestly one of the largest barriers you face, is what do I do to get to commercial scale? Like that first commercial plant I need to build. And especially in a segment that you're faced with, you have imports competition, you have also domestic companies in place. This is what we call the first of a kind stage, and we don't really have too much of dedicated first of a kind funding for an instrument for supporting new stage innovations to scale and grow. You'll see a lot of companies being around in existence for 6, 7, 8 years, trying to scratch a scale of growth because this is a pool of capital which is just not available today. We've been supporting a fund which is looking to deploy $100 million into India, and it's purely focused just on cooling, and is looking to target this segment of this initial stage growth. It's a fund called Coolpack Capital, and it's targeting this $2 to $8 million ticket size because that's where you have an opportunity to try and see, can it actually give capital, which can be leveraged for debt and so on, and then from that, you build on this track record of growth. And the second part that ends up becoming focused, and one thing I really do believe is needed is localization. We're not going to get anywhere without doing localization. So I think the points have been mentioned here are super crucial because we just fundamentally have to bring down costs in some way. But even if we solve for that, we're still dealing with how do we make it efficient cooling accessible. I think today we keep talking about making cooling accessible, and we're kind of kicking the can about grid loads and how we deal with that down the road. Well, we're trying to make an effort into it, but these are two different dichotomies we're dealing with. So how do you make it efficient cooling accessible is the instruments that is given to consumers and customers to actually be able to access. We have energy efficiency lines from SIDBI, for example. They're not the easiest to access. They are present, but it sort of gives an indication to other lenders and other folks that we can actually provide such valuable instruments which emphasize efficiency as a driver. We've been working with lenders to try and look at different ways of doing asset finance. I think replacement is a great approach, which really can make a difference. But there are just so many ways in which you can defer this big upfront cost to a consumer and think about different ways of deploying it. I think later on we'll hear from Smart Joules, from Arjun of Smart Joules, and they're a company we absolutely love. We've had the pleasure of working with them. They've taken a very interesting way of addressing this problem by making a CapEx investment, which is your entire HVAC system for commercial and industrial solutions, into an OpEx thing which is measured based on energy savings. So you're changing and it goes back also to incentives, which was mentioned, that how do we actually get people to adopt these two elements of efficient and cooling solutions, not just cooling solutions. And at that point of time, the advantage that really comes about with efficient solutions from a customer perspective is how does it operate over a period of a lifetime. So, and we can go on length about it, but fundamentally, the financing question has to be attacked in many different ways, but the biggest chunk where we see a gap is on how do we scale commercial cooling. And a lot of this is going to rely on policy to create the incentives for making adoption of efficient solutions more possible. But I think the good thing is we are seeing examples of both business models, of financing plays, and also of specific funding vehicles to actually try and enter and address the space.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing up a very important point, which is around scaling up of these solutions. And I'd like to come to that after I ask my question to Mr. Ashish. So Gaurav, you also highlighted the point that we don't just need to focus on air conditioners and fans. They are important, but we also need to look at other options such as HVAC, such as VRFs, where there is much more scope for promoting domestic manufacturing, and that's a segment that you have been kind of focusing on for a long time. So can you share your thoughts on what can be some of the ways to promote domestic manufacturing in HVAC segment based on your experience?
Thank you, Neha. So I don't come from a manufacturing side. I don't come from a policy side. I come from a specifier side. I'm a consulting engineer, and I deal with real projects, real clients, people on the ground. The opportunities in the cooling sector are in every area. If I speak to a fan manufacturer, I speak to IFMA, they'll tell me we need huge number of fans. I speak to Gaurav, he says my VRF market is exploding. You speak to chillers, they'll say there's so much happening out there. We have to address another, while we are doing this, and Neha also mentioned right in the beginning, she said that the cooling demand is going to go through the roof. The demand for the air conditioners itself, we have 10%, you said. My last figures was less than 10%, and we're going to be 15 more times by 2050. Those numbers are scary. The elephant in the room also needs to be addressed, where we keep speaking about decarbonization, climate change, which is what also going to get driven by what we are doing out here in terms of the manufacturing. So while we are talking of manufacturing and we are looking at how to scale this up, from my perspective, the scaling will happen parallelly in all the areas, but we have an advantage of setting it up in a way where the efficiency is the key. If you look at what has been done traditionally across the world, those are things that needs an improvement. We are looking for newer solutions. Those earlier solutions have not really yet delivered the results. The volumes that are coming, and if we see these numbers, we require a better solutions. I was at the Indian Green Cooling Council meeting just about 2 weeks back. Nobody is talking of the air conditioners alone. We are talking of air conditioners which are at least 40 to 50% more efficient than this. This is what the manufacturing segment is talking about. I can tell you, across the board, all manufacturers spoke about segregating temperature and relative humidity to come out with the next generation of the cooling. That's where the opportunity for India lies. While we are talking of air conditioners, and if we scale them up by 15 times, that doesn't solve our problem. Our problem is going to get solved by an out-of-box thinking, where we are talking of district cooling or cooling as a service, which came as a mention right there from on this table, where again you might see a market shift from just the air conditioners going to a larger equipment. At this point, while we talk of scaling the air conditioners, is that a right solution also needs to be debated, because we may end up going in the wrong direction. Because if we start looking at larger cooling solutions, district cooling and all, if you look at our India Cooling Action Plan, ICAP, the solutions lie somewhere else. AI is coming. It's building operations are under a big question at this point. You put up all of these fancy equipment, there is a building operation sitting there. So looking at that, my perspective is we have an opportunity to place our manufacturing in an area which can actually be a global leader in energy efficiency, can be a answer to what we keep talking about China, the big numbers, but we have an opportunity to place ourselves a little above, a little different. And that's where I feel the investments and incentives, the PLIs that we keep speaking of. I was speaking to Mehul earlier, the PLIs, the DST, what they are doing. I think that's where our focus needs to go from our perspective, what I look at it. Because on the building code side, I can tell you there is a big change happening. Government is driving it. The National Building Code, which is up for revision, should be out this year. The new energy code, the energy ECSBC, which is going to look at these big buildings, all of these structures that are coming in. The solutions required are very, very different than what we have been traditionally talking about. Our ventilation industry is going to look for a big increase, because that itself is going to go through a change in a big way. Reliability and energy efficiency should be the foundations on which we build up our manufacturing, if we have to really solve the problem of not only India, because our demands are going to be huge, we are just at the start of it, but also if we have eye to become the global leader. One last part I want to just add there. What we lack sorely in our thing is, even if we end up doing the manufacturing, the testing. And this is where I keep coming across the manufacturers, I keep speaking to them. And if we have to be globally benchmarked, globally represented, the testing is one area where we are lacking at this point of time in a big way in India. So there's a requirement for a sweeping overlooking to the whole problem rather than just looking at the small segments alone.
Thank you. And that's precisely the conversation I was having with somebody yesterday, and they said, like, yes, air conditioner demand is going to increase, but is that the right set of solution or fans, or should we look at it more holistically by looking at other solutions such as VRF, such as chillers, such as district cooling, and how much of all of these put together will contribute towards the cooling load, and what can be solutions for each of those interventions? So that's the holistic approach that we kind of probably need to move towards. With that, I would like to open it up to the audience if they have any questions for the panelists. We can take a few questions before we wrap up. Sure. If you could just introduce yourself and ask the question. Yeah. The coming with the microphone.
Yeah, my name is Arvind, and this question, or comment rather, is coming from more of a social sciences / policy perspective. So we have spoken about AC, fan, and all that. But what is the most revolutionary thing that's contributing to, let's say, heat adaptation at a local level in the communities, especially in the poor ones, where the rooms are just, let's say, 2 of these tables, is the small exhaust fan. So that has become, the life changer for them in the last 5-6 years. And this is not just small bunch of people, this is 30, 40, 50% of the population, easily, if not more. So what do you think about that? Are there such solutions which are already being used? And what are we trying to deal with or trying to do with exhaust fans? Are they going to be more cost effective? Can they be repurposed? Can there be more research on that? And can it be more cost effective? And can it be less louder, so to say? Because small room, 6 people sleep, but the fan is running. The costs are high, but the noise is also there. So just parking this question for the team.
See, a good question. See, first and foremost, the objective or the purpose of a ventilation or a ventilating fan is totally different from that of a ceiling fan. The consumption of, or as a matter of fact, there is no comparison as far as the power consumption is concerned of a ventilating fan or a ceiling fan. Now, coming back to your question, yes, it is becoming very popular because the cost to the customer is as low as 600 rupees or 700 rupees. But having said that, again, there is another part to the story, because these ventilating fans, which cost about 600, 700 rupees, is basically all plastic. Now, on one hand, we say we are discouraging the use of plastic or ABS or whatever. On the other hand, without plastic, or if you go for metal exhaust, the prices go beyond 1,000 rupees. A good metal exhaust would be anything between 1,200 rupees to 1,500 rupees. So that's where we are. No doubt this particular segment is growing. It will keep on growing. But there is a downside. So everything, as it is said, customer is the king. The customer has to decide. If he or she is okay with the plastic, if he or she is okay with the price, then we do not have any issues. As far as the industry is concerned, the industry is giving equal importance both to the metal exhaust as well as to the plastic exhaust. The industry has gone to the extent of, making exhaust fans or ventilating fans of various sizes. Now you get a ventilating fan right from 4 inches and it goes up to 24 inches. So that's where we are. I don't know whether I've been able to answer your question or whether I've been able to put it in the right perspective.
So if I can add, So I don't think the solution lies in selecting an equipment like this. I'm a designer. An exhaust fan putting at one end is not going to solve your problem. And there's a ceiling fan available to you. Why don't you look at that? Why don't you open up your buildings? The very fact that we have been speaking of our building industry as something, you seal it, sitting in a room like this, you seal it, eliminate the ventilation, and then we say, put an exhaust fan to solve the problem. That's not how we do it. If you look at the building solutions we are talking about, we're saying open up the buildings now. Let the air flow and let the fans come into the thing. So there are ceiling fans available which can force the air out, which can be silent where it can. So there are bigger issues. It is not just putting an exhaust fan and running at a higher RPM and talking about the sound alone. Those issues can be solved in many other ways too. So we need to go to different thinking altogether. Yeah.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Sheila Patel. Uni stole my question. I think what you're talking about, ventilation, I'm sure as a designer you have exposed yourself to the informal settlements in the country. The housing size is usually very small, and most of the so-called ventilation are little slips on top of the roof because they cannot afford to have windows. So what Uni was talking about is a serious need for air transfers that are needed in really small houses. And the volume of people who need it far exceeds the number of people who are going to buy your fans because their need is desperate. The other thing, although this is about fans, the other thing I wanted to bring to your attention is all the old inefficient cooling systems of old air conditioners and old equipment, refrigerators, everything. We live in Aladdin's land where we all sell our old televisions, our fridges and our air conditioners, and they get sold to people who are poorer, who end up spending more money on electricity with inefficient things. And I think that, as you said, sir, that associations have to look not only about plastic recycling, but also this aspect. Because whether it's a fan or an air conditioner or any form of electrical equipment, as you go for efficiency, the old ones are sold to people who can least afford that. So I think as industry and as associations, it will be interesting to find out how you look at that element of this process.
After.
Good question. So I come from the air conditioning background. So you are saying that you want to reuse that AC? Your question says that it gets used. Okay. So ideally it should not be recommended. As per the government guidelines, the life of an AC is 10 years. The best way to look at it and to solve the problem in one go is to buy a new AC, which is far more efficient. Go on, yeah.
I'm not talking about what I'm recommending. I'm talking about what millions and millions of slum dwellers are doing automatically, and I'm saying that it's my observation and my analysis rather than my recommendation.
I'll come to that. So the perception or the practice that is going on in India in some of the parts of the areas is reuse of inefficient air conditioning, or there are a lot of rental markets also, which gives the AC for 3-4 months and they charge some $5,000-6,000. In that you will see a unique combination of indoor unit of 1 ton coupled with outdoor of 1.5 ton coupled with a compressor of 2 ton. Okay, so that's a remix that is being used. So to avoid that, as per Government of India, the life of an AC is 10 years. Let me complete, then maybe I can talk to you offline. And we are in discussion with the government to, Mehul also mentioned from the World Bank. He has brought in a couple of hundreds of millions of dollars to address this problem. So the Government of India, we are discussing to have a policy to replace the inefficient air conditioners. So there are about 40 to 50 million air conditioners of such population which needs immediate attention. And the problem is these are non-star rated having a current of 14, 15, 16 amperes, whereas now we are looking at inverter ACs which run at 3 ampere, 3.5 amperes. So some of the brands, including Daikin, has taken a lead, and we are offering 6,000 rupees exchange, regardless of any capacity, any type, and buy a new efficient air conditioners. That is one part of it. The second part which you observed is you said that there are customers who want to buy these inefficient air conditioners, but the total life cycle cost would be increased because of they are inefficient and they will use high electricity. So the best way is to look at it as buy at EMIs, go for 5 stars, give that AC to a recycler, get some $6,000, which will, reduce from the ownership cost, and you will also get a e-waste certificate, which essentially as a customer denotes that AC is safely decomposed and is not used in the system. So all those efforts are being used, but you pointed in a great way, there is a need to have a policy on this so that these AC should not go back into the system. It does not go from one state and install in another state, because eventually the overall, electricity demand would increase, or the consumption would increase, to put it that way. So there are certain efforts that are being done, and I'm sure that some of the policies are in the making, which will eventually, typical to what has been done in petrol and diesel vehicles, they get automatically disposed of by the government agencies if they complete 10/15 years, depending on the fuel type. So something like that is also being done in the system to address the problem that you mentioned. Thank you.
Just 1 second. I see everybody is very interested in responding to that question, but I'll just take one last question and then we can respond to all of it consolidatedly.
I'm Dilip Mavdankar. I have background in medicine and public health. And my question is, excellent panel, but have any of you worked with human physiologists and occupational health experts? Because finally we are cooling bodies. There is a physiological mechanism. What we are currently doing is just to cool the space. Like this space is cooled, there is not even a meter to assess what is the temperature. And yesterday the minister...
Overcool the space, not cool.
Yeah, that's what yesterday. What I'm saying is, in such a hotel, in such highly technically this thing, not even a simple meter is put that you know where. And I see everywhere, many new buildings, no meter, even fan is not there. Because the combination of AC and fan can do much less cooling. I don't know why this is happening, and I would encourage, if you have not worked with physiologists, each medical college has professors of physiology, start working with them so that they will tell you how human body cools itself and what can be done. Maybe you have done. Similarly, occupational cooling, factory cooling, because that is another area. Our factories are not air conditioned, and the work will become more and more difficult, and productivity will go down, not only big factories but even small workshops. And what kind of cooling devices do they need? Thank you.
If you don't mind, I'll just...
Yeah, for any final comments on any of the questions.
Firstly, I think it's a great point that you mentioned, and this definitely has been a conversation focused around engineered solutions for cooling, and I'm sure there is an element of how do we start merging passive and engineered solutions as an opportunity, because I was talking to someone yesterday who's trying to encourage textile factories to actually adopt cooling jackets, so that it's sort of a personal way of how to do it, adopt it. But I think it is a great point that, and how do we actually merge it together? And I just want to pick up a quick point from Sheila ma'am's point, which is great. Like, I have a financing hat on, and one of the biggest things we look at is climate finance. A lot of it focuses around, it's a new segment, and we need to do a lot of adoption to create new markets. So that's the role of what blended finance comes in. Now, blended finance gets, I think, thrown around a lot as this panacea for life. We'll always have concessional capital and so on. It's not so, but it has a very important role for the situation that you spoke about. Now, the way blended finance is, for example, emerging is foundation capital, which previously would have just been a provision of grants, imagine using that same grant capital to make the adoption of a solution much more cheaper and affordable for someone to adopt. I think on one level, we need to start thinking about beyond just what government does. What do other pools of capital, what can they do to incentivize and adopt solutions? Now, we've spoken a lot about, there's been all this discussion about can CSR be used for that? Yes, that is still aligned to what government can do. But again, the thinking is trying to come in there, can philanthropic capital really come in to blend and support it further? The one other point I want to talk about also to your question, ma'am, is that this point of TCO has been coming up a lot, and it's a significant issue to address. We have spoken to folks who are trying to do solar-powered air conditioning. TCO becomes a significantly smaller problem at that point of time. But there, you're trying to then slowly, you have to basically build a new market. How do you ensure you talk to a person? Like, people think, oh, solar, it won't work at night. Night is when I want comfort and so on. So there's a lot of market making that definitely needs to happen. And I think the key role that starts coming into it is finding these key pools of capital and who can take a bit more of a patient role, can take a bit more of an experimental focused role. And the good thing, at least with the blended finance conversation, is we are seeing a lot more talking about it. And the core focus tends to be about how do we create positive impact at the end to folks. So I'm happy to have a longer conversation with you on this.
Just one last comment.
Just one
Okay.
request. In the interest of time, if anybody who wants to comment could just wrap up their comments in 30 seconds or so.
Sure.
Yeah, really
So,
quick.
ma'am, and sir, both of you, I think I differ with the panel here. There's a corporate solutions and these are money-based solutions. The solution exists. Set it very simply. The solution exists with us with the fans. I mentioned it my note also. Open up the buildings. There is a solution exists there. Ma'am, for you, the technology also already exists. District cooling as a service. Put that there. All these air conditioners can be put in the dustbin. You have a fractional horsepower motor running. The systems, the cooling is being produced somewhere else efficiently and at a much lower cost with a lower electricity bill. Everything exists. It's a question of are we ready to implement these solutions? Otherwise, we'll keep creating these heat islands, sell millions more air conditioners, raise the local temperatures, and then worry about how to solve that problem. Where do these air conditioners go? Everything, the solutions are there. They're available right now.
So since you said that you have observed a couple of customers buying second-hand ACs, my answer was based on that. I just want to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah, I think much of this has already said by the panelists. So only one thing is that we have to work coherently with all the institutions. We have to come together and come up with the better solution. We can't do the work in the silos. The industry, stakeholders, policymakers, governments should come together and come up with the better solution. Thank you.
So 2 points. First, on your question of ventilation, I think it begs a deeper conversation on things like building codes and how those are being implemented, and even informal housing. How are we providing for informal housing, right? And if you look at things like the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, there is a huge opportunity there to try and influence the way design is done. The part on whether these ventilation fans can be made more efficient, I think the technology behind any motor is the same. So if you make the motor more efficient, the ventilation fan also becomes more efficient. So to your point, yes, I don't think any of the manufacturers talk to any physiologists. That said, there are now cool jackets that are available. He spoke about them. I actually read an article from Zomato that they are distributing those for their delivery agents. So I think there is more that needs to be done, but I don't think it's a conversation for the manufacturers talking about fans and ACs.
Ma'am, one thing I just wanted to tell you that I think the government has already started thinking in your line, and as a matter of fact, to discourage this entire thing of second-hand stuff, second-hand fans, second-hand ACs being sold to the poor guys, and they continue to use the guzzlers. So what the government has done is that they have made it mandatory for the manufacturers to ensure that at the end of the life of the product, the metals are recycled. And there are strict norms. The penalties are very huge. So if not today, if not tomorrow, but I think in the coming 3-4 years, this entire cycle of second-hand appliances getting sold to poor people will come to a complete stop. So what might happen would be that, an AC which is 5 years old gets sold. But I think post 2030, there won't be a situation wherein you will find a 10-year-old AC or a 15-year-old AC getting sold to a poor guy. And as far as the parting statement is, ceiling fan is no longer a luxury. Ceiling fan is a necessity. The penetration of ceiling fans in this country is second to the mobile handsets. So we are talking about more than 90% of Indian households having a ceiling fan. So the challenge is that how do we get those old ceiling fans out of the houses and replace them with efficient, good quality ceiling fans. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. In the interest of time, we won't be able to take any more questions, but right after the panel discussions, everybody will be outside, so you can ask the question. I won't be summarizing the conversation, but I just have one reflection from this discussion that the problem statement has been expanded for me. It's not just domestic manufacturing of efficient appliances, it also is domestic manufacturing of efficient cooling products to make them accessible and scalable, and that's what we need to kind of think about in a much wider way. And I'd like to thank everybody here, and I'd like to thank NRDC once again for bringing all of us together. Thank you very much.
And we have a very eminent panel. And I request all our distinguished speakers and panelists to please join me on stage. The session will be moderated by Mr. Uday Khemka, and I'm sure he's not a stranger to any one of us. Mr. Khemka is well known in the climate sector. He's a business leader, a climate philanthropist, and really a thought leader in the space of climate resilience, work on heat and cooling. So I hand it over to you, Mr. Khemka, to take us through the session, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. And we absolutely have a fantastic panel who I've just been talking to for the last 20 minutes. And it's with great excitement that I enter this role of moderating. We've got a tight session ahead, so I will ask everyone to be quite disciplined with their answers. Let me just say a word or two of introduction. This summit that we're having over these last 2 days, as you all know, is existentially important. We know that. We know mitigation is failed so badly that the adaptation challenge is enormous. And we also know that the many solutions that have been proposed over the last 2 days have to be financed at massive scale. And we also know, unfortunately, and this is a setting for the panel, I'm going to start out on a down note, and by the end, hopefully, we're going to end up on a strong positive note, is that there's a huge gap. Many of you will know the UNEP adaptation gap report that came out last year. And you will know, in that case, that there is this massive, massive gap that we find, that whereas the amount of money required is, according to the report, is somewhere around $310 to $365 billion a year, that international flows, at least, are only $26 billion. That was a report looking at international flows in relation to total adaptation flows. There was another study by CPI that I thought was more helpful in a way, that talked about the fact that the annual target with 215 to 387 billion a year, and all kinds of adaptation finance were at about 76 billion. Now, one of the things I realized, Googling and interneting and using AI till very late last night, as one does in a last-minute way, is how completely pathetic and fragmented heat and adaptation finance numbers are. They're really very, very poor. So if there's a philanthropist here who wants to fund that work, please jump up and volunteer. But you can see, nevertheless, that there is a massive gap. The next point is that the vast majority of these funds are still public funds. And yet we realize that after 200 years of capitalism, the vast pools of capital on the planet are mainly private. And how to motivate these private pools of capital to meet these needs is one of the great questions that we're going to be asking our very distinguished panel. UNEP had estimated that the private sector potential was 50 billion. But when you actually look through that report, you find it's all very top-down. Although I don't blame UNEP, it's just very difficult to get the info. So we have on this panel people who cover everything. It's incredibly smartly put together by the organizers. Thank you. Makes my life easier. Public finance, private finance, banking taxonomies, insurance, new business models and technology, and also people who've created entire frameworks. So we're going to come to every one of our distinguished panel with a question, which is, how are you planning to give us hope? We're not here to chit-chat. We're not going to have a nice traditional discussion. We want your best ideas to bring the greatest finance, including avoided finance there, Arjun, to the table to actually move the needle here and bridge the gap. Let me start with, I am a philanthropist, as was said earlier. I've been working on climate change since '92 at the Rio Earth Summit. We're the oldest Indian philanthropy to focus on climate. And there are two financial pieces that I would bring to the table. If we have time at the end, we can revert, but you're not here to listen to me. One would be institutional finance, representing pension funds and sovereign wealth funds, worked with for the last 25 years on climate finance, and the other is philanthropy. What I will do is say a word on philanthropy, because I do think there is hope. The first is that we are seeing increasing collaborative initiatives of philanthropists across the world. The Climate and Health Funders Coalition brings together 35 funders and announced a $300 million commitment at COP in Brazil, working strategically together on the area of climate and health funding, where heat is a core pillar. And our foundation has the privilege to be one of the thought leaders in that pillar. But $300 million is still small. What is $300 million? If climate philanthropy on this area may be $1 billion, it's nothing. So why does it matter? So it's great. People are working together. We're bringing together institutional pools of capital. That's fantastic, but still small. I think it matters because there is tremendous innovation being harnessed by climate philanthropy. There's risk-taking, it's innovative, it's fast-moving. Many of these climate philanthropists have been working in mitigation, have seen the failure of mitigation efforts, are desperate to try and push forward adaptive measures and finance in science, in tools, in programs, in apps, in action plans, in building pipelines for scale-up that public sector players, MDBs, and others can pick up. The other thing I'd say that gives me hope is that coordinated action platforms like GIN, which was announced here, are being supported by philanthropy. And that's an information network. There are other initiatives emerging that are all about action, and multi-stakeholder coordinated action can be brought together in the safe space of strategic philanthropy. So there is hope, but it's a small sector. I'm now going to get to the adults. But before we go into more traditional parts of institutional finance, I'd like to shake up this audience with new business models. And so, Arjun, you're the first to get us going. And I'm super excited about what you're doing at Smart Jewels. And I'm totally ignoring the question I was given to ask you. I'm going to ask you to talk about what is your business model. And I think it's the best kind of finance, which is to reduce the need for finance by reducing OPEX and CAPEX costs altogether, at least in certain sectors of the economy. Over to you, and just a few minutes of intervention per speaker, please.
Thank you. First, I'd also like to speak about philanthropy. We have benefited from philanthropy. I think it's extremely important. So I started my entrepreneurial journey with a grant from Echoing Green Foundation in New York, followed up by a grant from Packard Foundation in the US. So we got 2 grants from the US, and that's how we actually exist as a company today. So I encourage anybody who's a philanthropist to give more, give wider. Now, with respect to what we do, I think a couple of questions here. Who here has played Monopoly? Anybody played Monopoly? Almost everybody. So we've seen that there's some utilities, right? There's a utility card, right? What are the utilities there? Electric utility, water utility, right? Maybe gas utility if you're playing a foreign version. So what we're building is the 4th utility, cooling utility, right? Cooling is not a utility. Now imagine if all of you had to build your own power plants to get power, to power your homes and offices and factories. Right? That would just be insane. What would be the outcome? It would be wasted capital allocation because we're not all experts. We would all have to choose the technologies to invest in, build the power plants, run the power plants, and in the process, waste millions and billions of dollars. Right? So that's what's happening with cooling. For our homes, we are building and deciding what technology we use, investing in the technology, and then maintaining it. Same thing for big buildings and same thing for factories. Right? Now, the other interesting part is that the biggest cost of cooling is actually energy cost. It's not the capex. So whenever you encounter a system where the biggest cost is actually in running, in operations, where the complexity of operations and maintenance are very high, where the technology choices are extremely diverse, in those kinds of areas, the as-a-service model makes a lot of sense. So what we started pioneering in India about 11 years ago is cooling as a service. Now, in this model, it's just like a utility model, right? We design, build, own, operate, and maintain cooling assets at our client sites, and we promise to deliver them extremely energy efficient, cost efficient, and high quality. Equally important, cooling is very personal, right? We can feel like 2-3 degrees up and down, and especially with humidity, 10% up and down can make a huge difference. So in cooling as a service, we are able to give cost-effective, energy-efficient, very sustainable, and high-quality cooling at a much lower capex and opex than what would be experienced otherwise. So I think to make this real, I can use an example very quickly. We work a lot with hospitals. So in the business as usual case, the hospital would design a cooling system, invest about 20 crores in the cooling system, and spend about 3 crores a year on the energy cost of that cooling system forever, right? So over 50 years, like 150 crores, and you spend 20 years on capex, 20 crores on capex. With us, they spend 0 on capex, 0. That's like 7 to 8% of the entire cost of the hospital, which is invested in by us, and the hospital has to invest nothing. And the running cost, instead of 3 crores a year, they're paying 2.5 crores a year, which includes the capex portion, maintenance, and energy cost. So there's a net savings every year and 0 capex up front. And on top of that, they get assured cooling, comfort, temperature, humidity, air changes as per standards. So that's kind of, I think that's what's to look forward to. We already have about 60 success stories across India and 25 cities. And we're hungry to scale that up.
But you've been very efficient with your time. Talk a little bit more about how the tech can, not that you've moved the capex to your balance sheet, how does it reduce in the mind of God the actual need for capex and opex? How does your efficiency increase that?
Sure. So going with the example of the same hospital, right? Standard process, consultant will design the building, and the consultant will not be responsible for running the building. So 100% of all cases are designed with, the people who are not going to operate, or in today's date, almost 100%. So what do you think is the standard outcome? It's over-design, right? Because you don't want to be caught with a hospital that is not cool, or a hotel which is not cool enough, because everybody can feel hot, but nobody catches over-design, right? Over-design is a disease. It's there in every single facility. So we're putting extra capex. Where you need 1 chiller, we're putting 2 chillers. Where we need 10 tons of cooling, we're putting 15 tons of cooling in that room. Imagine the cascading impacts of inefficiency when we are designing without the use of real operating intelligence. That's what's happening in the entire industry at the moment. right? Your eyes are closed, you're designing, you're anticipating all kinds of things which will never happen, and you're over-designing in capacity. So the first thing that we do is we use operating data, every single hour of operating data of multiple facilities across India, to actually decide what should be the cooling capacities of the system. That's the first place where you are able to actually become efficient. It's not only transferring the responsibility of investment from one party to another, but it's actually reducing the quantum of investment altogether. And yes, so...
No, that's exciting. So, Shishir, before this, we were chatting about 3 different critical areas. Let's start off with the 16th Finance Commission, because at the end of the day, public finance remains absolutely critical. Yes, we're going to boost private finance, but let's think about public finance for a minute. Could you start with that and then talk about, your thinking around also how companies can access bank financing more efficiently or reduce their losses, and also bring in your own thoughts from Aon and your current career about insurance, which will segue very nicely into Ashish's comment. Thank you.
So thank you, Uday. And first of all, I would like to congratulate NRDC for organizing this forum and bringing all the stakeholders together. It's a very timely planned event. And as you mentioned about the public finance part, so what 16th Finance Commission has done, it's a game changer when you talk about the heat-related investments, because they have recommended heat wave to be a notified disaster, along with lightning. So that changes the whole scenario, because earlier, we never had the funds for adaptation, mitigation, and relief and response for the heat stress or the heat wave. States have to notify heat as a localized disaster, and then they used to get the funds for the same. Now it's open funding, and states can take up adaptation projects, mitigation projects. They can spend money related to the heat financing. So this is from the Government of India side, because when you talk about the notified disaster part, it not only gives you the relief and response, but also allows you to use money for the mitigation and adaptation. So this is the first thing. Now you talked about the capital inflows, or how large corporates or companies, or we can contact the banks or use the leverage for the credit facilities. So we need to understand one thing, that a lot of anecdotal talks have been made about the heat in India, heat stress, health stress. That's right. But you need to quantify the losses, because the large corporates, they understand in terms of profit and loss. You tell them that, okay, this much of, like if the heat crosses this threshold, this is your productivity loss, this is your supply chain delay, and this is the loss of the revenue that it is causing. For example, a 1% increase over 42 degrees may bring down your revenue loss by 6%. So when you showcase this, they understand the severity and importance of it. So what happens after that? The insurance companies, they can risk it, the banks can finance it, and you can go with many options. But again, first thing, you have to quantify it. Like the wet bulb index, in which you bring all the things together, humidity, heat, air, temperature. So we need to think in an innovative manner about this. Then coming from the MSME part, because MSMEs are majorly informal and they not have as benchmarks as large corporates have. So you can have sectoral benchmarks fit into it. For example, a restaurant. So if you know that extreme hotter days, a restaurant won't be generating that much of revenue because the footfall will decrease. You can say that from 12 p.m. till 5 p.m., the revenue loss is this much due to this much of heat. So you can also benchmark that. Similarly, construction activities, supply chain, you can benchmark all the sectors based on the heat index. Now, as Aon, what our expertise lies in is that we can model that heat, we can model that loss, and we can bring the solutions, whether it's parametric or indemnity, but we can bring down the solutions that this is the loss you may face due to extreme heat events, and this is a solution we can provide by quantifying and modeling the loss due to the extreme heat. We are doing it globally. We plan to do it in India, and we want to take it forward.
Thank you so much. So why don't we turn, why don't we turn a little bit on the insurance side? In India, as you know, we've been talking about institutional adaptive behavior, and then we started to move to MSMEs. But let's turn to retail. The most famous innovation in climate heat adaptation finance in India has been parametric heat insurance. You've all heard that if you're in the community. Could you talk a little bit more about how those early experiments have led to enough data for companies as large as yours, it's a big insurance company, to really jump in and start to think about scaling this to a point where we could see massive flows of capital over time to parametric heat insurance? And what are the conditions required for that to happen? What do you need to have to make that happen? Thank you.
Right. So first of all, thank you, Mr. Khemka. I think as we know that the climate change is a reality now, right? And this increase in the frequency and intensity of heat, it's not just a meteorological event, it has some economic impact as well. Like our previous speaker said, Sishi talked about the impact on productivity. I think earlier speaker talked about the energy requirement, right? Similarly, it has impact on health as well. So insurance is basically to protect all these three things. Like what happens in case of when the heat is rising every time, right? So it has an impact on productivity plus your health and this thing, energy requirement. So for that, as such, there is no any financial product was available. And as an insurance company, though a lot of things are available, but we're not addressing the direct impact of this heat, right? So we came up with a product called Climate Safe. As a company, Bajaj General is India's second largest private company, and we are known for our innovative products. So when we realized this thing that as of now, the requirement is there, but as such no product is available. So we came up with a product called Climate Safe, and it's a kind of parametric insurance only. So what we do, we thought that let's first create awareness about this product. Parametric insurance has been talked about it, but mainly there were institutional buyers. But until unless retail customers will not understand its importance, that how this product work and how they can be benefited, how the strike and exit work. So we launched this product on a very retail level. Those product is available on the website. The best thing about this product is that this can address any kind of climatic event, be it heat, be it cold wave, be it your rainfall. Anything can be covered under this. And basis the requirement, a customer can find out that what is kind of sum insured they need, what kind of duration they need, and it's a very customized product. So they can kind of select from our website or our app, and they can do it. So I think our effort is basically to let the customer aware that this kind of product is also available. And as an insurance product, we can kind of address this basic, what is the biggest risk nowadays, climate risk. So that can be addressed through insurance product. So that is what we do. And how we kind of arrive to this product is that we are working with various climate data provider like IMD, Indian Meteorological Department is there. We are using their data to understand the risk, to analyze the risk. And then we use historical data of last 30-35 years. And we use that to kind of to design the structure of those products. That's what we do.
And when we were just before the panel, we were talking about whether you felt there was enough data to show you that on an actuarial basis, this is indeed a profitable, financially viable product. Would you agree that the data now exists to show you that, and that's why companies like yours are interested in it?
So as I said, it's not about the profitable. The idea is basically to create awareness about this product, right? So we are using the data what is available through IMDs, right? And they don't give us forecast. The forecast is only short-term forecast, right? While we have to price this product, or actually we have to analyze the information. So we need long-term information, right? So those, as of that kind of capability is not available, right? But we are trying our level best to use historical data to come up with some kind of proxy, some kind of analysis has to be done, and we are keeping some margin to make it a viable product or sustainable product.
And the other thing we discussed was the idea that, to get the kind of scale we're talking about, you need NGOs and other organizations to aggregate enough demand for you. Are you seeing organizations beginning to do that?
So you rightly said that insurance in our country is not like that customer kind of get up in the morning and say that let's go and buy insurance. They need someone who can kind of tell them that what is the importance of the insurance, why it is required. And for that, we need aggregators like you rightly mentioned about NGOs, there are bankers, there are many financial institutions whose risks also get covered through this. So we are working through them, and there are many channel partners or this kind of organizations who understand the climate risk. They're coming forward, they're helping us in taking this product forward. And I'm happy to tell you that I think in the last 1 year, we have been able to get more than 40,000 customers. They come with their own. We have kind of tied up with 2-3 financial institutions. They have kind of bundled our product as a heat resilience product for their loan amount. Yeah.
Wonderful. So, turning to you, Jorge, in the case of Arjun, Ashish, and Shishir, I have a very clear way of putting them into a business function or a business background of a particular kind. In your case, you've had about 3 different careers, at least. But you've also worked on frameworks to think about the enabling conditions for private sector finance and finance more generally. So you could wear any one of the hats you've had over your distinguished career. Give us a sense of 5 or 6 key enablers of the flow of finance at scale to this sector.
Uday, thank you so much for the kind words and also for NRDC for inviting me to this select panel. Let me just, back for a second. I'm going to try to be as brief as I can. Promise not to overshoot on my time. But there are a couple of things. One is, just wanted to break a myth that we have, that several of us have in mind, that finance for climate is climate finance. They're not the same. Climate finance is a term that has been coined in the international negotiations, and it's a tiny, tiny bit of finance for climate. Climate finance is a negotiated term. It's about public finance going from developed countries to developing countries. So when we talk about how to make heat being seen by climate finance, we're shooting on our foot, because we're just trying to compete for a very tiny bit of the amount of money that is out there. I would actually refer, in order to change that paradigm, to one of the objectives of the Paris Agreement, that it's all finance flows. It doesn't say climate finance. All finance flows need to be consistent with a low emissions and climate resilient pathway in the world. And so, thanks, Sheila. So with that, let's just immerse in what we mean by that. That means that for any kind of financial decision that we make, we need to have to consider climate as a vector that is changing the trajectory of how we see the world. And that has 2 consequences, and I will reflect to the 3 of you previous to me on the panel. One is, how do you actually think of resilient investments? And how do you think of investments for resilience? 2 different aspects. And those come both from the public side and also from the private side. Let's talk about the first one, resilient investments. That is what our colleagues at Aon and Allianz were talking about. We know that there is a trajectory on climate risks over time. We know how those risks might manifest on our investments, being that an infrastructure, being that a technology that is established, being that even an insurance product. And so how do we adjust those products to include those climate risks in a way in which we completely mainstream our financial decision based on those risks? And hence, we can prove, and that's where the private sector is starting to get to a certain degree of clarity, we can prove that if we make some investments right now on adjusting that technology or that infrastructure, we might have returns down the road in terms of avoided losses. So we can measure that. That's a straightforward decision for whatever financial, even if we didn't have climate change at all. That's how financial decisions are made on a daily basis. And for some reason, on climate change, and particularly on climate risks, we haven't been doing that. So that's the first one. The second is investments for resilience. And that's where our Arjun was talking about is, we know that the world is going to be different. How do we actually create new technology that it's adjusted to that world? Whether it's, drought-resistant seeds, or that it's, more efficient irrigation systems that will allow us to use less water for the same production. And so we are just, again, being completely blind if we don't know, we don't see that the world is going to be a very different world down the road, and we should be creating the next technologies yesterday to try to adjust for, 10 years from now or 5 years from now. So just responding to your question very briefly, the private sector has been consulted over and over and over of what they need to actually jump into those set of opportunities. And the answers are not coming back that easily. And so that's a reflection for us. One is they would love to be more involved on how governments and local governments and central governments are defining their adaptation investments down the road. They would like to be part of that party, and they're not being fully invited, or they don't understand exactly how that operates. Second, they are trying to understand how they can contribute towards building capacity in different actors across the financial ecosystem to be able to engage in conversations such as the one that I just mentioned, resilient investment and investment for resilience. Third, blended finance. The possibility of connecting public, private, philanthropic, and other kind of financial sources through a capital stack, and being transparent in terms of who contributes to what in that stack of capital towards advancing investments for broadly investments in general is not there. So conversations a lot about blended finance are quite siloed and very transparent in terms of how that information is flowing. And they would like to actually play a role in that. Fourth is how do they engage on, and that's one thing that private sector, particularly the ones that are most advanced, claim that they are not yet there. That it's how do we harmonize the standards, taxonomies, investment criteria that define perfectly what is an adaptation or resilient investment. So then when you do an investment, you don't have to justify and discuss and try to convince others. It's just part of the package. It's part of the range of opportunities that you have to invest. Fifth and fourth, and I'll just close with that, is on the fifth one is insurance, and we just talked about that, so I won't talk more. And then the last one is locally led adaptation. So we're talking about the trillions of dollars and the billions of dollars that are flowing or potentially would flow to address all our problems around infrastructure, big ways of living that will change, big investments in agriculture. But we should also be looking in ways in which we can create financial resources to go bottom up to the people that with little bit of money will change our lives. Those mechanisms are not fully advanced, and I think private sector should play a role on that as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And that was a real masterclass. Thanks for that, Jorge. I want to pick up one thing that was said here. Not climate finance, but finance for climate. Because I do think that could be a secret sauce for all of this. If you think about it, capitalism is founded on risk and return. Not just return, but risk and return. So if there is impending risk, then that implies the need for higher return. That's to say, your cost of capital has just gone up. Your insurance premium has gone up. Your credit rating has got worse. And that applies as much to an individual as to a company. So if you can truly avoid that extra risk, if you can truly lower your cost of capital by taking averting action, then you are now harnessing the largest streams of money available fiscally and in the private sector to take averting action early. And we all know from all the studies that have been done that the action now is much less costly than action to then deal with the consequence. So mitigating upfront through adaptive behavior is going to save a lot of money. So there must be a way of monetizing this, and I see that as a thread going through this conversation. Now, we started late, so I'm going to turn to our wonderful organizers who, hello? Hi, I'm just turning to you to ask. We started a bit late. Do we still have a hard stop at 3:30 or do we go on? 3:40, okay. So then let me turn back to the panel and say, this is a rare meeting. You've got everyone here is an expert too. So it's experts talking to experts. If we could create a collaborative set of financial initiatives at the system level to try and address this question of increasing the flow of finance to heat adaptation, would you have an idea for this audience that we could take back to NRDC, who are our wonderful hosts, and say we actually came up with 2 or 3 great ideas of what we as a community could be doing together to push forward this agenda? One of the things I said is just to be able to track what adaptation finance actually is, because the data is all over the place. Any other ideas what we could do collaboratively? And then we'll throw it to the audience, and then we'll open it up for audience questions. Why don't we start with you, Arjun?
I would need a couple of minutes. I think the gentleman here has some ideas.
Anyone who has a good answer.
So when we're talking about this heat adaptation or heat resilience solutions, right? So ultimately, we're talking about insurance, and for insurance, like in India, I think more than 80% workforce who are basically exposed to this climate or heat is basically they are mainly from construction sector, or they are kind of gig workers, or they are farmers, right? They are the one who still needs to understand about this concept, how it works, and also they need some kind of support in terms of premium payment. So what we have faced in the last 1 year is that though they understand that there's a need for this kind of product, but when we talk about that you have to first pay some amount to get the cover to mitigate your risk. So then they step back. They said, okay, then let others do first, then I'll come forward. I think as a collaborative effort, this kind of NGOs are there, organizations are there. If there are many projects which are going on, right? So maybe some kind of premium financing can also be done for those customers, for those kind of segment who actually need this kind of product, but because of affordability or because of understanding, they are not coming forward. And that will much better to kind of increase awareness and the kind of acceptance of this product.
So we tend to live in silos. We talk finance, but actually awareness. And we were talking in other sessions about the importance of awareness on heat, and that could be linked to these kind of solutions. That's a great idea.
So, gentleman I used to work with in Lawrence Berkeley lab, Professor Ashok Gadgil, he writes a lot about heat stress. And, he did a sort of survey of India and tried to find out if there is any quantification of the impact on extreme heat on human life and the costs of that. And he found that everything that we have in the public domain is flawed by orders of magnitude. So there's a very clear problem, like linkage of heat stress to loss of life, impact on productivity, right? Productive hours of labor, and also like just longevity of life are not very well understood. So I think that's, an organization like NRDC can probably throw light on that and do, help the country fix that. If we are able to account properly for the costs of, adverse exposure to extreme heat, and then, sort of encourage measures that are to be taken, like simple measures like shading, right? And then, he talked also about rapid chilling, like if it's extreme heat, you put like a ice collar or something around, make those machines available. Like there's many solutions out there to protect against the worst of extreme heat. I think we're just starting, like he put out this paper and it was eye-opening, but there's like a whole body of work that will emerge from that.
Thank you. Shishir?
So I have 2 ideas here. First, when you talk about heat, so I would suggest that don't talk about heat in just one hazard or a disaster. You can club it with one local disaster for a particular state. Like when you go to Orissa, you can talk about heat and cyclone. When you go to Bihar, you can talk about heat and floods. Because what happens, it expands and multiplies the impact and the understanding of the people. Because heat alone, if you talk about, so definitely it's a very imminent thing and we have to act upon it. But as you also said that not of things are not being talked about heat and the effects of heat. But when you club it with any other disaster and hazard, it will definitely catch an attention. Secondly, I have worked with NDMA and I felt that a lot of convergence need to happen between different ministries and departments. When you talk about heat, it's NDMA issue also. It's MOE FCC, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change issue also. It's Ministry of Labor's issue also. So a lot of ministries, they have to come together and they have to create a plan, not just to sit in silos and working differently and, all by themselves. Because in NDMA, we felt that something was being done in MOE FCC, but we didn't know about it. So a lot of information, like you said, awareness, dissemination of information, coming together for creating a national plan, it needs to be done.
Thank you. Ashish, you've already spoken. Jorge? Or did you speak? No, I don't. Yeah, you did speak earlier, yeah. Please.
You can speak again if you want.
Okay.
So I'll put an example of something that happened, and I with the apologies of the case in terms of the extrapolation, but I think it proves the case. It happened in North Carolina in the U.S. North Carolina has a hazard, a climate hazard, very pronounced, that is high winds and and storms that are just increasing, and particularly in the coastline. A lot of houses were uninsured, a lot of houses were insured, but the insurance was quite limited to certain level of damages. These winds have been increasing over time, and they're just ripping apart the roofs of a set of houses in the area. The local government decided to do a couple of things. That's where extrapolation starts getting tricky, but let's run with me this exercise. So the local government issued a bond to get capital. And that capital, what it did was that they were giving a portion of that money, like a rebate, so a return money for actors, for householders that wanted to use roofs that are more resilient to winds. So by doing that, the local government managed to have, if those householders were using those kind of roofs that are more resilient to winds, they were going to have a cut in their premium of their policies. So you create a set of cycles. The first cycle is on the private sector side. You create business for insurance companies that are looking for more policies to be issued, even if they are reduced, because they have a guarantee that those roofs, that new technology, is going to survive winds. The second is that you create a whole ecosystem of new construction materials, of new ways of thinking about roofs, and that it just brings the private sector fully into a space that it wasn't before. So if you make a parallel, I'm not going to go through a whole exercise with heat, but if you think of cool roofs and how you can make a way in which you can have this blended finance between a public actor putting resources to back up that change, and then creating the whole financial ecosystem of private actors, both in the insurance side and then the construction side, boom, you have an economy being created out of the blue for heat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So what we're going to do now is open it up. And if you wouldn't mind, just say your name, your organization, and if you would like to direct it to a certain person on the panel. Otherwise, I'll let anyone on the panel jump in. So do, ask whatever questions you may have. Yeah, right at the back there. Please. Can we get a microphone to the back? Otherwise, just holler.
Hi, thank you for that sort of extensive discussion. I'm Laksh, I'm National Law School, Bangalore. I have two questions, very short. One is, how would a gender transforming financing would look like? Because we know that the impacts of heat or other climate impacts are not equitably sort of, experienced by people. There is a differential and disproportionate impact. So can these differential abilities can be built into financing? It has happened in other sectors.
You were referring to gender, were you?
Yes, gender responsive and transforming financing.
Just make sure we can hear.
And second, I'm all for parametric insurance as a mode to address those sort of issues. but who's going to pay for it? Because the people who are experiencing these impacts are not the ones who have caused it. So it's a disproportionate impact. If they are meant to pay for it, it's unfair, it's injustice. So how can we also build injustice to that? Which means who will be paying for it? Where will the money come for the insurances? It can't be another sort of, money for profits and the profit game another time. So that's another. Thank you.
So there's a practical element, there's an equitable justice element, there's a question of gender, there's a question of, whether parametric heat insurance premia should be paid by those taking out the policies. Who would like to jump in?
I can answer about the parametric insurance part. So if you see that you're talking about, that's exactly right point to make, that people who are suffering and the most vulnerable, if we are taking a parametric cover for them, obviously asking money from them would not look so nice because they are the ones suffering and then we are going to them. Because how insurance works is that either a claim will trigger or it won't trigger. But parametric insurance can have different triggers also. You have different percentages, different temperatures, at what temperature, what kind of payout can be given. Also, what we can do, like in the PMFEY, Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, if you see, the farmers, they are paying a very small amount of premium to get their stake involved in the process. And a lot of subsidy is coming from the government of India and the state governments also. In relation to the heat also, we can do and we can make a similar kind of a product to first initiate an awareness among the people. Because first thing what we have to do is to create an awareness that people should know that what kind of products are there, how I can safeguard myself from any further kind of problems or issues or heat-related losses or health losses. So we need to make people aware, like these kinds of products are there. In the starting phase, we can incentivize that by paying the subsidy from the government side, then the private players also can come in. You are forgetting about one thing, that's corporate social responsibility. CSR funds. A lot of CSR funds are being spent in India and being donated for different causes. But surprisingly, climate disasters, I'm talking about from the disaster point of view because now heat is a notified disaster. So not much of the CSR funds are being poured into the disaster-related activities. So we have to make a case for that CSR pays for such kind of activities, such kind of pilots, and a scalable national level product can be made out of it.
Just to add, what Shishir said is, I think we're discussing this thing prior to this session, that because ultimately the productivity is impacting the outcome for that organizations, right? And if the productivity will come down, ultimately it's the organizations will suffer. So as per the Indian labor law, it is mandatory for any organization to provide them accidental insurance or health insurance. In the same way, I think the organizations can also think about this, that they can provide parametric insurance for all their labor or all the employees. I think that will help the organization, as like he said about CSR, this thing. It will also help kind of creating awareness as well as provide them any kind of those kind of the losses which can happen due to this climate or heat that can be compensated through that insurance. That will help.
Thank you. On gender, I just wonder whether a careful study of microfinance may not reveal that the interest rates offered to cooperative groups that are led by women may be actually lower cost than those for men. So it's a really interesting area to look at, is whether of course there can be ethical norms through regulations, through corporate behavior, through CSR. But I think there's something deeper in that systemically that could be explored. Any other questions? Yep, please, Alexander.
Thank you, Dai. My name is Alejandro Saez Reale. I work at the Global Heat Health Information Network. And yesterday we had a governance session where Jason Lee, the chair of the Southeast Asia Hub, said, if a decision maker says he or she doesn't have resources for heat, it's because that person hasn't fully understood the problem. So my question is on information asymmetry. Do you think that with the business case for heat action, with a proper understanding on the return on investment for heat action, would that somehow help accelerate policy uptake? Like, what's the role of information in accelerating financing into policy? Thank you.
I'm going to just make a comment, then hand over to the panel. When we think about the issue of information, in capitalism at least, that information, in this case, would feed into risk assessments. And if that, we had a comment about communication earlier, and there could be, I think, a very valuable exercise in conveying risk even further than has been done. Because there was a moment around COP in Glasgow when there was a lot of talk about risk and putting that out there and the narrative of stranded assets. But if there could be a way of bringing this into banking and insurance and finance, cost of capital, in a way that changed discount rates, interest rates, it captured brokerage reports, it could make a difference, in my opinion. But it's not self-evident, because as you know, capitalism is very, very bad at pricing in long-term ethical goods. It doesn't do that without help. So it could be a really interesting joint project to actually bring together communication about specific risk in a way that affects cost of capital. But anyway, over to all of you, please.
I can't speak specifically to heat, but if you look at buildings, right, where extreme heat is also felt and productive hours are wasted, I think one can look at the example of LEED certification. Right, there have been multiple studies that certified buildings are much healthier and lead to higher productive hours, and so the financing in many places for certified buildings is better. So I think over the last few decades we have seen that happen, right? If there are studies and good research to support that, certified buildings are healthier and better, and therefore their finance costs should be lower, that has kind of made an impact. So I would think it helps. That's one example.
Alejandro, one of the ways in which you can leapfrog the lack of information and the always the typical answer of, we don't have enough to actually then project risks is by using proxies. So whether you can use loss, productivity loss, and whether you can start measuring that on, in this case, formal settings, but you can start assessing whether, not necessarily if it's connected or hit or not, but if you can assess over time how that productivity loss goes down, then you can start incentivizing employers to take on a look at how they can ensure that productivity loss by enhancing working conditions, and so there are proxies that have been tested. I think it would be a good start to look at those proxies, being that health related, economic related, or even financially related, even without having all the information about heat impacts.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Dilip Mavadankar, part-time consultant to World Bank and professor at Indian Institute of Public Health in Gandhinagar. I have two ideas about the insurance premiums. Think about it and maybe a reflection from the panel. For a long time, Government of India is giving free of cost insurance to farm laborers. The premium is paid by Government of India for accidental death. And now also I saw natural death is also covered at a small premium. So is it possible to sell this whole idea to Government of India to cover whole set of people within the country, or to any state government? So they pay the premium and the people are automatically covered with certain eligibility. So that is one idea. Second, India and some states have large milk cooperatives, other farmers cooperatives, etc. Can they then subscribe to for their members, because for a large insurance pool you need a large, like the fertilizer cooperatives and milk cooperatives. Can we think of selling that idea to these cooperatives so they pay the premium and then the members are covered automatically? Thank you.
Well, it's wonderful when there are very concrete ideas from the audience, and we have experts in the insurance industry. So please, what do you think of these two ideas?
Rightly said, sir. I think I also mentioned the same thing, that government is providing insurance to all the laborers, right, for natural death and this thing. So what we have kind of proposed to the government is they can include this under Indian labor law and this thing. And if anything happens because of this climatic change, so maybe any employee or any labor, they should be able to get some kind of benefit. That is what one thing is there, and I think we should propose that is there. But the only thing is, like we have seen that in case of Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Yojana, government of India doesn't pay the entire amount, because if anything is free, then it will not be valued, right? Ultimately, customer has to, or employee has to pay at least some small amount, not very high. But you rightly said, if it will be done at the national level, then the premium will not be an issue because it will be very small in that way. So we can propose this to the maybe the Labour Ministry on this. It's there.
Would you like to make a comment?
Actually, government paying the premiums is still, I won't say that there will be a lot of voices for acceptance of this, because I have been a part of that also. Already few schemes are being run by Government of India, as Ashish ji has told. But what happens if you see that government buying insurance for the people? So that causes a lot of questions. If the triggers, if it triggers and the payment is being made, it's a very good policy. But what happens, like you are paying a premium and you don't get anything in return after a year or so? So a lot of backlash is what comes in. And there is also a political impact to it. So many things are to be taken into consideration when you're talking about government buying an insurance policy for the people. It can be like a public-private partnership, or it can be that people paying a small amount of premium and government can subsidize it. But buying an insurance policy from the government side for the people, so that will raise many challenges and questions.
Thank you. We have time for maybe one or two small. I'll try and give someone at the back a chance.
Hello, thanks. I'm Dr. Manjunath from CACP. I wanted to ask the panel about the...
Would you mind speaking up, please?
Yeah. So I'm Dr. Manjunath from CSAP, and I want to ask the panel about the social stock exchange. Whether anything can be done in social stock exchange other than the zero coupon, zero principle, for parametric insurance or for other products for heat resilience.
I'm not sure if others got that question. Social stock exchange is what I heard.
Yeah.
Would you like to just say another word about what you mean by social stock exchange?
So the government has set up the social stock exchange to fund non-profit organizations, etc. They have come up with the SEBI guidelines. SEBI has come up with the guidelines for zero coupon, zero principle. But I was asking the panel if there are any other ideas to enable more blended finance or other parametric insurance sort of products under the
So you mean, could there be a government-led systemic intervention to create a new kind of capital market that could, for example, fund subsidies in parametric insurance or some other kind of clever innovation by the government? Any thoughts on that? I think you may have answered your own question. Sounds like a great idea. I see some members of the government here. Come and talk to them. One more question, maybe from this side of the room. Yep.
Hi, this is Akash. I'm with NRDC. So oftentimes we hear about sort of the lack of financing, but I'm sort of a bit perplexed because I'm thinking about, say, for instance, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, where there is a lot of money already being sort of, earmarked for building sort of a lot of construction in the coming decade. How do we link compliance with heat resilient designs, say, for instance, in buildings, with subsidies? So the question really is about how do we use existing money well in a climate responsive way?
Well, I think that's a really important question, because we know deep in our hearts that even though we want to motivate huge amounts of private sector money, philanthropy money, etc., if you look at 8 billion people who have to adapt to heat, the core has to be fiscal. So how do we build the pipeline to be able to absorb this money most effectively, is what I'm hearing. Did I understand the question? Anyone have a good answer to that? It's really interesting because normally finance sits in its own silo. And you raise a very important point, but it has to connect to the real economy. It has to create to real sectors where real pipelines of investable deal flow come from. I'm using business language, but you can use government language for the same thing. Any great ideas on that?
Yeah, just to say, sorry, that all money can be climate money.
Well, I liked what was said here. And actually, you give me a perfect way to sum up, because we have 3 minutes. But, I was talking to someone, an organization called the Global Center for Adaptation in Rotterdam. And their model was to recharacterize MDB funding by putting a heat lens on every project, right? So they, at that time, this 2-3 years ago, claimed that they'd recharacterize about $10 billion of MDB and DFI funding. That sounds super smart. Instead of seeing, this goes back to Jorge's comment, as climate finance, it's finance for climate. You bring in the heat lens on every piece of financing that is coming from every source. So as far as that way of thinking is concerned, that can apply to fiscal flows, government flows as well. And that's where you have to think of every bridge, every house, and that's where we need this entire community's help, to your point, in designing those houses and those bridges, in coming up with the technology to make this all happen. However, so I would say for MDB and public finance, the recharacterization of every program with a heat lens would shift us from climate finance to finance from climate. And similarly, we need to, however, also think about some of the points the panel has made on private sector finance, because government finance and MDB finance will not be enough. And one of those points of view, when you start thinking, my background is in mitigation finance, and there we always start off with the cash flow. Where's the private sector cash flow? We realize the IRR doesn't quite work, and we go to blended finance. There's not enough blended finance on the planet to make this work. So therefore, you need to think differently. That's good if you can identify an individual. In India, there are many private health clinics, there are many private schools, they make money. You could put blended finance to offer them investment to make IRRs and risk match with blended finance to some degree. But the problem is too big. And therefore, I think it also needs something that came up in another session, which is to design ab initio, and I think this is also implicit in Jorge's comment, design for adaptation, mitigation, and development up front. You're building a building, it's the same amount of money, more or less. It could be even cheaper. But build it to take this into account at the design stage. Secondly, look at new technologies and business models that can change the paradigm. Thirdly, when you do identify cash flows and you could recharacterize them, then think about incentives and regulations. You think about safety in a cinema. The safety in the cinema is not something that only the capital market is meant to solve. The government says, I'm sorry, this cannot have a fire. So in the same way, regulations do have a part to play, and we cannot forget the sovereign power of government to regulate, and at least to provide incentives, both positive and negative. But for me, the most important point about private sector mobilization that came out of Jorge's comment, but also Shishir's and others on this panel, was to say, look, there's a tool in capitalism that allows you to go from climate finance to finance from capitalism, which is to identify the risk embedded in heat and to make it transparent to behavioral change so that you lower your cost of you lower your premium, insurance premium, you lower your cost of bank debt, or you improve your credit rating. It's another way of saying the same thing. Because you take that action because it's in your economic interest to do so. And there was a point from the back somewhere, and that needs to be communicated. And we need programs that communicate this to capitalism to speed up that which will happen naturally over 10 or 20 years, to make it urgent, fierce, and now, so that we get this thing done as a community. My last word to all of you is, please let's see this as a family. All of us working with fierceness. We don't have time for this to be a discussion group. We need to see this as one family working together. And I, on that note, would like to thank my brilliant panelists who are dedicated, and most importantly, NRDC, for having us in this wonderful conference. And I wish much strength to your sword arm in the battle ahead to move against, to save so many lives in the battle against heat and climate more generally. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What an energetic moderation and panel. We've got such different perspectives on finance. Thank you so much for sharing all of those with us. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kemka. Yeah, let's have a picture.
Join us.
Please, one for the panel first. All right. Thank you so much. We are not going to break because we don't want you to leave this room. I'm being very upfront about it. But as we set up for the next panel, it is with great pleasure. We have an important announcement to make, the seeds of which were planted at GHCF 2025, and we are extremely happy to make that announcement. And for that, I'm going to call upon Mr. Jata Sonik, former Chief Secretary, Government of Maharashtra, to please join me on stage. Yes.
Thank you, Prima. It's with great pleasure that I announce here that Honorable Chief Minister Maharashtra this morning has done the virtual launch for the Center of Excellence for Heat. And Abhiyan Tiwari from NRDC has already proposed a name for it, which I particularly liked. I hope you can also indicate your, sort of acceptance of it. It's called Sustainable Adaptation and Resilience Institute for Thermal Action. So that includes both heat and cooling. This center was part of the discussions that formed the outcome of last year's Global Forum right here in Delhi in 2025. And I had suggested that there should be a center which will continue to work in between the two summers. Usually you find that before the summer season is approaching, there's a lot of activity, and then once the monsoon hits, until almost the end of the year, heat and heat action sort of takes a backseat. So this center, hopefully, which has been launched virtually, and the NRDC team has put in a lot of hard work to plan a calendar of events that will launch very soon. So hopefully this center can become an anchor for all the wonderful organizations and agencies which we have seen have taken part here in this particular forum, and all the hard work that is being done, the initiatives that are being tested in the field can become, this could be like a lab where this is actually examined for its applicability, its scalability, and a lot of policy drafts can flow to the government, not just in Maharashtra, but nationally in the country. Hopefully, some of the best practices can be scaled up in the region as well. So this will be a lab where these things can be discussed, debated, looked at for the practicality of it all, and not only that, it can also focus on the capacity and training, development of all the people who are engaged in heat management. And it will not only look at heat, it will also look at cooling initiatives, which is something that we often find are not moving in tandem with heat action. So this can become a center for thermal action, as Avihan puts it, and I quite like the name. So I invite you all, whenever you get a chance, please participate in the activities which shall be obviously put out by NRDC. And we have a partner in IIM Nagpur. So it's a wonderful institution. That's where this center will operate from until the new building in which it will be housed comes up, which may take at least 18 months. So until then, it will operate out of IIM Nagpur. So the center is not in Mumbai or in Delhi, it is in Nagpur. So thank you all of the people who have participated in the discussions that led to this outcome, and those who have been waiting for something like this to come up so that we can scale up the kind of work we are doing here in India. Thank you all for your support, for your encouragement, for your various suggestions that you have made. And I do hope, since we launched GIN this morning, the regional hub of GIN, which will be housed in Delhi in CEW, I hope that together these two centers can play a very catalytical role in energizing some of the initiatives that are being taken, but they need to be tested on a larger scale and brought up for applicability across the states. I would also like to invite Alejandro from GIN and Professor Jason Lee. I don't see him in the room right now. There you are. So from NUS, we don't want to continually do the same things repeatedly. So some of the things that you have already tested out and you feel that there are toolkits available or there's material available which can be used to immediately get started and hit the ground running, we would welcome your suggestions, your participation, your advice on how this center can become a place where good ideas can translate into positive action. So thank you once again, and I'm very happy that we could do it in almost a year since the last forum, and hopefully in the next forum we'll present a report on what we did. Thank you once again.
Thank you for being with us here today, and I welcome you all to the second day of the Global Heat and Cooling Forum 2026. We have some of our guests still coming up from the session downstairs, but in the interest of time, we learned our lesson from yesterday. We are going to start with our plenary session. With that, I would request our esteemed speakers for the first session, please join us on stage. We're kicking off with a discussion on cooling for the future, advancing domestic manufacturing and job creation in India. So I request all our panelists to please join us on stage. Very warm welcome to all of you. Before we get on with the session proceedings, and I hand it over to Neha Dhingra, who's the director for CLASP India and a very deep expert on energy efficiency standards and energy efficiency overall work in appliances. We are very fortunate to have her to moderate the session. Before that, we are starting the day with a report launch. The report is on ceiling fans, the work that has been done by NRDC and partners, really looking at the technology and looking at how domestic manufacturing within the ceiling fans equipment and systems could be put in place in advance. And I will request my colleague Jerry to please talk about the report, and then I will pass it on and request all our panelists to release the report.
Thank you, Prima. So, good morning, everyone.
India sells about 60 million ceiling fans a year. The total number is going to grow from almost 450 million to almost 950 million in the coming decade. And we are about to double one of the largest electricity load in Indian homes. And yet, this remains one of the most overlooked part of our energy systems. The opportunity here is straightforward. Super efficient ceiling fans using BLDC and improved induction motor can deliver the same comfort using far less electricity. The technology exists, the challenge is scale. How do we make sure that efficient fans is the default choice? They are affordable, reliable, and make in India. NRDC, in collaboration with Greentree and with support from Department of Science and Technology, has developed this blueprint to answer that question. This is a national roadmap to make super efficient ceiling fans the standard by 2030. It builds on 3 priorities: higher efficiency, affordability, and stronger domestic manufacturing. The report sets clear targets on performance through service value, on the price, and on localization. And it outlines 4 actions: better design and materials, stronger testing and quality standards, creating demand through incentives, procurement, and awareness, and building the ecosystem for R&D, testing, and manufacturing support. This is not a marginal improvement. It is a shift in the baseline of the entire market. If we get this right, we reduce electricity demand, lower costs for households, and build stronger manufacturing in India. The blueprint is grounded in extensive consultation with the industry, government, and academia, including both the formal sector and informal sector. It reflects what is possible and what is practical. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jerry. I request all our panelists to please release the report for us. Thank you. You can open the ribbon. Yeah. I'm going to request the authors of the report to please join us on stage for a quick picture, and also our colleagues from Greentree. There we go. Thank you so much for bearing with us for these formalities. Over to you, Neha, please.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this panel discussion on advancing domestic manufacturing for cooling products in India. I would like to start by congratulating NRDC for bringing all of us together, for putting this great event together at an appropriate time when the heat is just increasing. And I would also like to congratulate them for releasing this very important report, which kind of provides the blueprint for advancing domestic manufacturing for ceiling fans in India, which is a very important product for us. India is at a critical inflection point. Cooling demand in India, as we all know, is expected to rise exponentially. And within residential sector, there are two products which are going to contribute hugely towards this demand, that is room air conditioners and ceiling fans. And both of these products have a very different trajectory, growth trajectory, so to speak. Air conditioner penetration in India is about 10%. It is expected to grow 15 times by 2050. On the other hand, room air conditioner penetration is about 100%, and it is expected to grow 2 times by 2038. Standards and labeling program in India has done remarkably well in advancing energy efficiency in India. Our labels, our standards are one of the global best now. What we need to do now is think about how do we move from creating a market to a globally competitive manufacturing hub in India for energy efficient appliances. And in this session, we'll aim to unpack how do we use levers such as policy, markets, finance, and innovation ecosystem to advance that. And with that, I would like to turn to the panelists, and we have a very diverse panel. We are joined by government representatives, we are joined by eminent industry leaders, leaders from financing organizations, and investors as well. So in this panel, I would like us to explore and think about not just how we make India a manufacturing hub, but also think about resilience of supply chain, think about creation of jobs at scale, thinking about creating an innovative ecosystem, and all of it put together, how do we move towards an ecosystem which is energy efficient, climate friendly, and also keeps us at the center of making a global domestic manufacturing hub. With that context, I'd like to start with my questions with industry. I'd like to start with you, Gaurav. You are representing one of the leading manufacturing firms on air conditioners in India. And my question to you is, what do you think are some of the key enablers, and what would it take for us to not just produce room air conditioners more domestically, but also to have components which are very energy efficient, which are climate friendly, produced domestically at scale? And what are some of the ways that we can advance next generation air conditioners penetration in India?
Thank you, Neha. I want to thank NRDC for inviting me, and I feel great to be part of this panel. Thank you. And coming to your question, it's a very good question. I think some of the enablers that I see from the industry point of view is, one, we have to look at component manufacturing, like you raised compressor. I would take it further to motors and also heat exchangers and also printed circuit boards. In compressors, you will see that a couple of brands and organizations have started doing indigenized production. Daikin, if you look at, we have 2 years back, we have produced Daikin compressors for our own captive consumption. And also we have partnered with Rechi to have that compressor to give to other OEMs and also for captive consumption. That is first part. I think JVs will make a lot of difference in utilizing the technology and then building upon that technology further to go up to the scale. Second, I think the government of India did a fantastic effort in PLI for room air conditioners. I think similar to that approach, we should look at developing PLIs for critical components. Unfortunately, we are still dependent on aluminium and copper, especially for heat exchanger. We are dependent on other countries. So I think we need to look at it from the whole, we call it in industry as BOM, bill of material. So the whole BOM should be indigenized. The focus should be on that, including compressor, heat exchanger, motor, controller. If you go back, couple of years back, even ACs were imported. But now, ACs have also, I believe, 98-99% are locally being produced by all the brands in India. That is first point. The second point is, PLI, like I said, I think we need also look at developing PLIs for critical components. The PLI may not be as stringent as it was for room ACs, but because compressor is a low value item compared to the proportion of air conditioner, so it should be rationalized in that way. And similarly for other components also, because that's how the industry can be developed and local manufacturing can be encouraged. And some of the enablers can also be the BIS QCO process has to be easy for those brands in the beginning, and of course we can make it stringent once the local production gets in. And last but not the least, I would also like to mention that apart from JVs, the R&D should also be equally focused with a lot of innovations and best practices that we have taken from around the world and should be disseminated and implemented in India. And of course, the tax structure for producing high efficient components should also be taken care of while looking at, because this is going to be creating a competition amongst peers to develop more energy efficient components. The ACs are already in place, and we are only talking about room ACs. I believe there is a lot of gap in when you go to light commercial or commercial ACs, example VRV, VRF or VRV or chillers. I think the gap is larger. Room AC is still well positioned in terms of local production of even components also. Some of them I highlighted which needs attention, but commercial ACs needs a lot of more attention to look at going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Gaurav. So my takeaway from your points is that one, that there needs to be some kind of regulatory intervention that needs to come in to ease the production of some of these components, and second takeaway is doing more JVs, which kind of helps scale up some of these intervention. And the last one is we need to also look at other products and technology, and we have some of the representatives who are kind of focusing on not just room air conditioners, but also on fans and HVAC segment. So I'll kind of pivot to the fan segment now, and we have Mr. Poddar, who has been a leading voice in the industry, in the fans industry for last 3 to 4 decades, and he brings extensive experience. So, sir, my question to you is, how can innovation-led manufacturing, including new technologies, be promoted to be able to create more job creation? And also, what are some of the biggest gaps in the manufacturing ecosystem for fans as a segment that you would see? And
thank you, Neha. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. That's a fairly large question. So let me break it up. See, fans, unlike air conditioners, in terms of technology, it's a very low-tech kind of an product. And if we talk about fans, there are various types of fans. You have ceiling fans, you have table fans, you have exhaust fans. But India being a tropical country, ceiling fans is the most important category, and it accounts for almost 70 to 75% of the total fans which is sold. Unlike the global scenario wherein it is 70% non-ceiling fans and 30% is ceiling fans. And if you compare the production, it is India which accounts for almost 80% of the total ceiling fans manufactured in the globe across all the countries. And one of the domestic manufacturers is the number one manufacturer of ceiling fans in the world, and that should give us a lot of pride. Having said that, I'm sorry to say that there has not been much innovation as far as the ceiling fan motor design is concerned. The design which was been in existence since the 70s and the 80s that continued till BLDC came. And people were happy. And because of the domestic consumption being so high, people never looked at exports in a very serious manner. And people were happy, and the entire ecosystem grew because as the demand increased, there were a lot of small scale, because if you remember, I told you it's a very low tech item. So if in a room as big as this, you can perhaps make a lack of fans, because all that you have to do is assemble, get the blades from somebody motors from somebody. So coming back to the question which Neha asked, that when it came to the fan manufacturing, people were very, very clear that we don't want to, look here and there. We will continue what we are doing. Till the time, the BLDC thing came in the picture. And why did BLDC come? Because somewhere people felt that the fans which are being produced or manufactured in India are guzzlers. So for a typical household, it didn't make a huge difference, unlike an AC or a water heater. But if you take the country in totality, you will find that 7% of the total, 7 to 10% of the total electrical consumption is an account of the ceiling fans which are running in the country. Today, as we speak, the guess is that there are about, in this kind of a season, there are about 100 crore fans which are running across the country. So you can imagine the kind of consumption which is happening. So to mitigate that, the result came in the form of an efficient motor design. And that is where BLDC came. But the question is that, how do we innovate? So that was a ready-made kind of an technology which was available. Somebody decided that this BLDC technology can be adopted in fans, and we started going for BLDC. But again, we as a country, we as the manufacturers of fans, we didn't think out of the box that within induction can we do something. So the question is that why BLDC or why not BLDC? The fact of the matter remains that when we talk about BLDC, we as a country, we definitely save on power. But having said that, our dependence on the other countries goes up, because unfortunately the key component of BLDC are magnets and the PCBs. And unfortunately, both the components have to be sourced as far as India is concerned. So what happens? Our import bill goes through the roof. And the manufacturing also gets restricted, mainly because it is more of a shopping exercise. So if you talk about the manufacturing, if you talk about the employment, then there is a requirement, there is an urgent requirement wherein we do something to innovate, we do something to ensure that the existing technology which has given employment to lakhs and lakhs of people, how do we get that kind of an efficiency in induction? Today, there are people who are saying that they have been able to tweak the motor design along with the existing blade design and come up with induction motor wherein the consumption has come down from 75 watt to 50 watts, and now they're talking about 32 watts and 26 watts. Then the question which might come to your mind, then what is stopping them from producing, or what is stopping the Indian industry going ahead and creating that kind of a manufacturing base of the existing product? Induction, BLDC can keep on moving. But then if you talk about increasing the manufacturing base, giving that kind of an impetus to the MSMEs, then what stops us? Fact of the matter is that scalability, wherein we need to put our minds together and see that if the same 5-star fan with the same fan with a service value of 6 and above has to be manufactured in an existing induction motor, then how do I get the cost down? How do I make it affordable? So this is something which we need to think on an urgent basis. Parallelly, there are some other technologies which is available, and that is where we need to put our minds together and work out something. It may not happen today, it may not happen tomorrow, but 5 years down the line, 6 years down the line, I am sure we would not be talking about only induction or BLDC. There would be other technologies also available. And we need to seriously think about it. That chalta hai attitude somewhere needs to be removed. And for this, my request to the people from the government bodies or the government departments, they have to lead it. And they have to force it on the industry. I don't know whether I was able to answer your question.
Yeah. You certainly did, sir. And this also kind of tells a very interesting trend, that there is not just difference in penetration of air conditioners and fans, but also there's a stark difference in terms of localization. While in air conditioners, we are talking about and thinking about ways to promote localization of components. In the fans, the story is totally different. They are not just domestically produced, but also exported. And there we are thinking about how do we move in terms of efficiency, and if we are moving, then are we making ourselves more prone to imports? So with that, I'd like to move on to our next panelist, Mr. Pradyut Kole, who's representing DST here. So, sir, you've been hearing all the discussion. So in your view and experience, and given the role that DST has been taking in advancing some of these cooling technologies, what do you think can be some of the enablers and actions that DST can take to commercialize and to bring some of these technologies on ground and scale up deployment going beyond research? And, what are some of the things that you have been thinking about and planning to undertake?
Yeah, thank you, Neha, for this wonderful question. And first of all, congratulations NRDC for this 2 days global heating cooling event. It is the wonderful and time of our event. And coming to this question, that as you know, that DST, Department of Science and Technology, is the main extramural funding body for the research and development innovation over the years. So, and we have taken up many initiatives, and especially if we come to this cooling, sustainable cooling, heating cooling as built environment, we have also over the last decade we have given a huge funding support for the throughout the country, as well as we have working with various bilateral and multilateral projects with various other countries also. So we have also our IITs, NITs, ISCs, they are working wonderful work in this innovation, R&D. And we have invested hugely in the last 10 years. But the thing is that the main challenge is that they have done the wonderful work, but now the thing is that we have to take this innovation to the market. So this is the need of the hour. And now, because previously, still date, the main mandate was DST is the research and development and the R&D. You may say the basic R&D up to 12, 4, 5, but now this gear is shifted. So we are now coming in the translational research also. So how this R&D, the fruit come up with our various institute, come to the market. So this is one thing that we are taking up, and in collaboration with various industries also. And we are also frequently doing that stakeholder workshop with industries, relevant industries, then with academia, and so that we know that what type of problem they face. And once we float the problem statement and for our research academia institute, then we have to know that what kind of problem they are facing and for which problem they need the solution. So we are frequently doing that workshop so that the right kind of problem statement we can create and we can place before our academic institute, so that the innovation is come out. And now we have made it practice that in each and every that research program, that right from the beginning, industries should be a part of this call for proposal. Then if it is a consortium mode project, then along with 3-4 academic institute, there should be a couple of relevant industry, so that testing validation can be done with the help of that industry. We'll be happy to know that we are also working with World Bank in the AHEAD program. This is a DPIT AHEAD program. So Mehul will give you a brief of the details of the program. Then we are also have a couple of workshops also with World Bank, so that right kind of problem it can be come out with this workshop. We have also done a workshop with NRDC also, that this is, as JD mentioned in the speech, that a wonderful report come out. So these all are happening. And it is not that previously it is that we are working with silos, but now we have to integrate academia, industry, and the government body and the policy maker, so that we can right kind of solution can be delivered at its go to the from lab to the market. So it is happening, and we assure you that we're continuously working on this direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for sharing with everybody that you've started to kind of think about and take actions for promoting commercialization and bringing some of these research products to the market. And your initiative, particularly of bringing industry along with academicians, is very important in that regard. And thanks for touching upon the integrated approach, because that takes me to my next panelist, Mehul. Mehul, you've been working to bring together the overall cooling ecosystem from policy, from manufacturing, deployment, and adoption perspective for a while. So in your experience and view, what are some of the key enablers that are needed to promote and scale domestic manufacturing of some of these cooling appliances, let's say air conditioners and fans in India?
Thanks, Neha. First of all, I want to thank the NRDC team. This is the second time they've put together this event, and it's really nice to see people from both the heat and the cooling industry come together. Typically you don't have policymakers working on the heat stress part of it, talk to people working on the solution side. So congratulations to the team. I'll start with why the bank got engaged on this problem, right? It was primarily because we started looking at access to cooling or abatement of heat stress as a critical problem that India would face in the coming years. And this program, which we are talking about, the AHEAD program, was essentially an amalgamation of a lot of work that came together, building off from the India Cooling Action Plan. We did a report trying to see how it can be operationalized, and then looking at what are the critical bottlenecks. And one of the bottlenecks that we found was for India to start manufacturing devices at scale. There's a huge amount of dependence, whether you look at the AC's value chain or the fans value chain, the efficient part of the fans value chain, on markets such as China, Korea, Japan, and Thailand. And what is it that India can do to try and overcome that hurdle? It's also an interesting inflection point because the government is pushing for Make in India. The government is also very keen to try and get R&D up and running in the country. R&D spend in the country is increasing. They've got programs such as the ANRF running. So as you look at the overall ecosystem at this point, it's ready and raring to go. And I think that's where the opportunity is. From the perspective of the AHEAD program, and to your question, Neha, on what are the policy incentives or policy mechanisms that need to be put in place, I would bucket them in three different categories. The first is R&D. When we talk about R&D, I think there are three elements within R&D. The first one is obviously blue sky research, which is the technology readiness levels, the TRL levels 1 to 4. Which is something that the government has been financing for a very long time through DST, and they've done an excellent job of it. The second is, technologies that are between TRL levels 4 to 10. That's really the commercialization and the prototyping phase. That's where India has not done a very good job. And one of the thrusts should be going forward is to try and focus dedicated attention to try and get prototyping facilities and associated industry academia partnerships that allow for deployment and R&D at scale. The second would be, the third part of this would be to really look at how you can process engineer better, right? I think if you look at the vapor compression technology or even the fans technology, the motors, people are well aware of these technologies. It's really the price disability between, say, China and in India, which is around 18 to 20%, primarily exists because they've been able to figure out the process part of it. So how can we optimize on the process of manufacturing? That really needs to be a thrust of R&D as well. And that's where I think AI would play a critical role. The second pillar that I was talking about is manufacturing incentives. And manufacturing incentives, as Gaurav Mehtanji, about you're looking at PLIs, specific PLIs. That could be one way to go. The other way to go is tax incentives. Could we think of differential GST structures for 5-star devices to be made slightly cheaper or taxed at a lower bracket? So looking at a whole host of incentives that you need to give to the industry to be able to overcome that price disability that we spoke about. The last would be uptake. We've spoken at length with the industry about a replacement program. Can you think of retiring old 10-year, 15-year-old ACs with new ACs? So can the government think of a replacement program at scale? The other is, other than the domestic market itself, could you start looking at export markets? So, Africa could be one, Southeast Asia could be one. And for doing that, there is also compliance and reliability testing capacity that you need in the country. So can the government provide that testing capacity, provide tax holidays that allow our manufacturers to start accessing those markets? So all in all, this is, in my view, an industrial policy problem, and it needs to be viewed with a lens of all of these three dimensions: R&D, manufacturing, and uptake, for us to be able to land on a good solution. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks, Mehul, for providing an ecosystem level view and bringing together R&D, manufacturing ecosystem, and adoption, all of it together, and looking at some of those solutions holistically to be able to scale up manufacturing. Now, I'd like to pivot to the next panelist, Mr. Shravan from Climate. So from your experience of supporting early stage climate ventures, what do you think are some of the key enablers that are required for scaling mass deployment and commercialization of domestic production?
Thank you, Neha, and thank you, NRDC, for the invite. I think off the bat, and I'm just building off the work of everyone else here, fundamentally, so it makes my life a bit easier. Fundamentally, when it comes to early stage innovations and scaling up, India does not have an innovator problem. Indians are able to build and at least get to a level of being able to prototype very innovative solutions, like the work that Pradyot does at this DST and so on. And like Mehul mentioned, we have a very good ecosystem of getting solutions to a particular stage. We have a problem with scaling solutions. That's fundamentally been right across the climate space, because funding hardware is hard. And funding hardware in new and emerging sectors is even more hard. And it's additionally hard in a segment in cooling where you already have traditional solutions available. One of the things that has been, I think, a recurring topic is the fact that we need to be making solutions accessible for more parts of the population and so on. And fundamentally, you're going to be dealing with a situation of, do I make access to cooling available to them? Because we're dealing with 40-degree temperatures. And how do I make that efficient?